Joined now live at the library by Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Joy Campbell. Attorney General, it's good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Happy New Year
And
to all
to
of
you.
us.
So,
Wait, let me just say,
what?
if you have a question for the AG, you can call or text at the 877-301-8970. And if you're here at the library and would like to ask a question directly, go see our colleague Olivia, who's about to raise her right hand. That would be Olivia
thank you,
and her right
Olivia.
hand. And she will connect you, assuming your question is appropriate.
So, Attorney General, we spent a lot of time moaning and groaning and all the terrible news coming out of Washington. But we have, and congratulations to you and a bunch of other attorney generals that sued the Trump administration. We have some good news about health research, medical research, about the wind farms, about research funds at colleges. Tell us.
So, obviously we are still facing unprecedented federal overreach from the Trump administration, blatant constitutional violations, and we're fighting back. We're now up to close to 50 lawsuits against this administration, and the goal is to protect billions of dollars in Massachusetts investments. Those lawsuits, they have tried to take away $3.27 billion in Massachusetts investments, and we have protected $3.11 billion in Massachusetts investments by these nearly 50 lawsuits. So I'm proud of my team. Thank you, and that applause goes to them. And just to give you some recent victories, especially in the NIH context, and this is federal funding that goes to biomedical research, clinical trials, pediatric cancer, for example, PTSD. We won a huge lawsuit victory with indirect costs. So all of those things that create the jobs, the infrastructure to be able to do this research here in Massachusetts, we won that case. And that's a huge victory for us, full stop. So now these indirect costs, these billions of dollars will continue to flow to Massachusetts. And just to give you an example of how important this funding is for our economy and also for the life-saving research that it is, in fiscal year 24, 219 Massachusetts organizations received approximately $3.46 billion. That's nearly 6,000 research projects of real human beings, children included, veterans, seniors, looking for cures to diseases. This is jobs, of course. This is what makes Massachusetts not only a national leader, an international leader in the medical and the health space, huge. And when it comes to climate and infrastructure projects, we continue to protect offshore wind. We continue to win dollars for example, our FREMA projects, BRIC grants, which are infrastructure projects in various municipalities for climate resiliency. And then, of course, consumer protection as a whole. The last I checked, elders, for example, are still being scammed, and we don't have a federal partner to protect us on those things. So it's our office that are stepping up in partnership with AGs across the country. And I've been saying if folks are feeling any type of despair and hopelessness in this moment in time, remind yourself that you live and work in Massachusetts, the greatest state in the country. The greatest state in the country. And on top of that, you're not alone. You have an AG that has your back, and this team has your back every day. And then lastly, our lawsuits are working. They are working to protect the foundation of many of our people's lives, and we'll keep fighting on your behalf.
Are any of these subject to appeals that the Trump administration could then take to the Supreme Court?
Some of them could be, but for the most part, many of these we have won at the district level or at the appellate level. In the NIH case that I mentioned, particularly on indirect cost, we won that at the highest court in the circuit. So that's a big deal. They haven't appealed that. I don't think they will. So that's done. And that's a huge victory for our state.
One last follow-up on these things. And again, if you want to talk to the Attorney General, ask her a question, text or call 877-301-8970. In terms of the NIH thing, the research thing, that requires that correct me if I'm wrong, that the processes that were stopped by the Trump administration must restart and be dealt with fairly. It obviously doesn't, well, I shouldn't say obviously, it doesn't mean that there's any requirement on the part of the Trump administration in the future to provide grants to these organizations, right? It's about existing thing. Am I right about that?
So NIH 1 was these indirect costs, so the lab structure, infrastructure, and employees. NIH 2, that's ongoing. And we are taking a leadership role there. We just had our incredible lawyer, Jerry, actually argue this case before the First Circuit. And so we're continuing this. We have been going back and forth with the Trump administration, so some of those funds are still flowing. The processes that you're talking about, some of that has continued, but we're still, and they have agreed to go back to a process because before they had abruptly stopped the process
For
as a
the
whole.
things that were in the pipeline.
That's exactly right.
But things that are not yet in the pipeline in the future, if Trump wants to be as anti-science and as anti-research as it is, that's a whole different kettle of fish.
Of course, he could
Okay.
always be that.
Okay.
And let's just make it clear, we will always be prepared to fight
Understood.
and file a lawsuit at every iteration, just like we're still doing with SNAP benefits to make sure
Understood.
people have access to food.
One last thing, and I'm going to make an offer since you were nice enough to wish us Happy New Year. If you're able to guess what my question is about, you get a free GBH tote bag. What do you think it is?
The auditor.
Auditor. Now, here's my question.
I love bags.
We are more than a year.
Free bags.
Free
You're gonna
bags.
get
Because
a
we're in
free
a
bag.
cost of
Very-
living crisis.
I don't know if
That's
we're
right.
allowed
like
to give it
free.
to you. I think we can give it to
I
you.
can gift it to someone who needs
Okay,
it.
fine. Now, in a moment of seriousness, as we've discussed every single month with you and the auditor when she's here, 71% of the people voted for the auditor to be able to and to audit the legislature. There's been a year-long standoff, or maybe not quite that long, but close to it, since the voters voted. Well, it actually is a year long between you and the auditor. If the standoff continues, you blame her, she blames you. Does that mean that the voters are never going to get what they voted for?
I hope the voters get exactly what they voted
But
for.
if the standoff continues,
I hope the auditor stops the standoff. And I say that not to suggest that there's any animosity. It's not personal for me. We represent almost every state agency and constitutional officer in the Commonwealth. We have done that, I think, exceptionally well. Anytime an agency comes to us and asks us to represent them, we ask them a certain amount of questions, they reply, and then we move forward or not. The only agency or constitutional office we have had any issue with since I've taken office is the auditor. And it's not for lack of trying. It's not for a lack of trying to resolve this. There is a pathway forward where she could get a lawyer. We've asked her specific questions. Instead, she sought
get a
to
lawyer and do what?
a SAG lawyer. So for example, if we're not going to represent her directly, she says, well, allow me to go get a lawyer. Even in that posture, which we allow for other agencies, she still has to answer certain questions. And she has not provided us those answers.
But one of the questions
And so
you're
I
asking-
would actually suggest maybe the next time I can provide you those questions.
Okay.
And you can ask
I'll do
her
that.
the
We'll
answer
do
to
that.
those questions because
But-
I think that's what we need to move forward. And if we do, we will. But we
my
need the answer to
understanding,
those questions.
correct me if I'm wrong, and then I promise we'll move on to the listeners. My understanding is one of the questions is not about what you, the auditor, currently want to audit at the legislature, but what you might ever want to audit the legislature. Isn't that an unreasonable request? Why should she have to answer now what she might decide to audit next year or the following year?
The court would ask her that. There are constitutional limitations on what her office can audit the legislature for. And even before the ballot question, we put that out there before the ballot question.
Right, some things are
Those
appropriate by your account,
And so
some are
she
not.
has to be able
Right,
to
okay.
answer those constitutional limitations because if she goes into court to suggest otherwise, the misrepresentation is not okay. It undermines the credibility not only of our office, but also of the law itself, and we can't do that.
So you're going to provide the questions, we'll
Sure, we
broach them
can.
with her, and
Absolutely.
we'll continue this thing. We're
Absolutely.
talking to the Attorney General. Now it's your turn, Lori in Roslindale.
Lori?
You're first. Hello, Lori. Welcome.
Hi, thank you very much. Good
Sure.
morning.
Thank you.
I am breathless, Madam Attorney General, at your accomplishments.
Oh, thank you. I was just going to
listened
say, slow down if you're running. You're breathless. We'll work it out. Thank you.
And I also hope you're enjoying Dartmouth. I will point out for your boys that Dartmouth used to have a fabulous nursing school, so you might want to take a look at that at UMass Dartmouth.
Thank you,
Now,
Lori.
here comes my question. A lot of developments are being planned in my neighborhood, and we're having a great deal of difficulty understanding which developments should submit impact reports, environmental impact reports, impact on protected classes. When do they need to do the assessment? When do they need to do the mitigation? And I'll ask specifically, are these assessments depending on whether the developers request federal, state, or municipal dollars?
So, Lori, if you could stay on the line, because I'm about to put on my former Boston City Council hat for some of those questions. It may depend, and it's more of a City of Boston question than it is for our office. That being said, we can still be helpful and useful, I think, to you. So if you could stay on, Lori, with Martin from my team, we'll get your contact. We'll talk about what the specific projects are and then follow up with you if that's okay.
Lori, stay on hold. One of our producers will pass along your contact information, and thank you much for the call.
You know, Attorney General, we've been watching a lot of terrible views in Minnesota and Minneapolis, you know, people getting dragged out, American citizens getting dragged out of Target stores, ProPublica reporting about chokehold use by these ICE agents, somebody getting DoorDash delivered and ICE agents tried to follow the DoorDash delivery person into somebody's house. I mean, just kind of awful video. So what do you think, and what does any of this mean for Massachusetts?
Well, I will say I stay in direct contact with A.G. Ellison in Minnesota, A.G. Raoul in Illinois, all of my Democratic AGs who are seeing unprecedented attacks in many ways by ICE agents and sometimes Border Patrol agents within their communities. Tear gas used indiscriminately. Obviously, the horrific death of that woman in Minnesota. Tragic to say the least. This was a mom. This was someone dropping off their child at school. This was a U.S. citizen. And then to have the vice president or the federal administration blame her for her own death is awful and unacceptable. And so I'm continuing to stay in contact with them to support them in how we hold ICE and federal administration officials accountable. It is not easy for us to do, but we are all on the same page that accountability is necessary. I also hope we do not see what we're seeing in Illinois right now, in Oregon, and in Minnesota, here in Massachusetts. We're tracking this. We're telling folks if they are seeing things in Massachusetts to report to our office. We are also, of course, staying in contact with law enforcement and so many others, doing rapid response for folks who are unlawfully detained, and there have been people that are unlawfully detained. We're doing Know Your Rights trainings. We're putting out information so people know what their rights are if they are detained, and also what bystanders know what their rights are. And sadly, the agency that is responsible for holding these officials accountable for what we're seeing, these egregious attacks, is your U.S. Attorney's Office, is the federal administration. And clearly they're unwilling to do that. And the lack of transparency as well. And you're seeing that play out in Minnesota. The fact that Keith Ellison, A.G. Ellison, is having to do his own investigation while being shut out of the FBI investigation into this death is unacceptable. There should be collaboration by everyone. Someone died. And instead it is state AGs that have to step up. So I hope we don't see what we're seeing there in Massachusetts, but we'll continue to support them, and we'll continue to hold officials here accountable and support our immigrants every step of the way.
And people can get the information on your website?
Absolutely. We have a whole landing page. If you just go to mass.gov/AGO, there is a whole landing page of all resources for immigrants generally, for anyone who is a resident of Massachusetts and anyone who chooses to come to this great state. And while I have this public platform, I think it's really important to stress, because I am hearing the narrative be misinformation, suggesting that all immigrants are somehow criminals. That is nonsense. People are choosing to come to Massachusetts to work. People are choosing to give their gifts to this great state, including in the context of healthcare. If you think about Haitians, for example, our elder care system of healthcare in Massachusetts would come crumbling to its knees without Haitians. It's as simple as that. And so let us not forget we are a community and a state of immigrants. And those who are perpetuating crime on our communities, well, we hold them accountable. We do that in my office, and my law enforcement officials do it with transparency. They do it without mask, and they do it with a real seriousness and also real training. The last point on this is the federal administration is putting out a lot of incentives to hire folks quickly. They are lacking training. They are lacking the background that law enforcement typically needs to do their jobs effectively, which is causing fear, eroding trust, and most importantly, making it more difficult for law enforcement at the state level and at the municipal level here in Massachusetts. So we'll keep doing what we can to support our immigrants.
One last follow-up thing. We had, last week, we had 3 individuals on the show, Attorney General, who were arrested at the Burlington ICE facility for attempting to deliver food and some medical, menstrual products, a bunch of things to people there. One of the complaints is how poorly ICE is treating people there, including having them stay overnight, sleeping on cement floors, that sort of thing. I think it's select people. I'm not sure
Town
what the
meeting, I
town
think it
meeting.
is.
Well, whatever it is, whatever the people there who run the town, they say they cut a deal with ICE. I think it was in 2007. I'm not sure of the year, but part of that deal, not part of that deal, central to that deal, was that no one would be held overnight. ICE is violating that, according to them. They have attempted to enforce it unsuccessfully. Is there not a role for, if that's true, and I assume it is there not a role for you in terms of enforcing an agreement between the town of Burlington and ICE itself?
ICE and the federal government have significant authority to do almost what they like in the context of immigration enforcement and detention. And the U.S. Supreme Court most recently gave them license to do it in a way that we think is discriminatory.
You mean that thing out of California?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And even in their federal facilities. So I have authority over the state. And so, for example, if folks were detained in the House of Correction, say in Plymouth, or in other places in Massachusetts that are immigrants or Suffolk County, we have the ability to make sure that they are treated well, that the conditions of confinement are not subpar. We have very little, if not any, authority to do that in the federal context.
Even if they have made an agreement about certain conditions.
And so an agreement with who, right? At the end of the day, the agreement for the federal government to do things quite differently is usually with Congress, or if it's a state agency, so me working with my U.S. attorney counterpart, for example, we both could say we're not liking the conditions and complaints we're getting on Burlington. Let's come together to improve the conditions there. But unfortunately, we don't have a real working relationship to be able to do that. It's not
With
to
the
suggest,
U.S. attorney.
Exactly. It's not to suggest we didn't have it before. We did. On many cases, we did a lot of great things together. And I think even what Senator Warren said recently to the president himself, if you want to address affordability, public safety, we are ready to do those things with you. But instead, what we're doing right now is public safety on our own. We're doing consumer protection on our own. We're addressing affordability and the housing crisis on our own, because they're choosing instead to expend the limited resources they have to detain immigrants who are working, or who are here lawfully, or who are seeking a pathway to citizenship, who are no public safety threat whatsoever. And let's be clear, those are federal public dollars, your tax dollars, being used for those purposes, instead of for affordability and other things. I hope they change their agenda, and I hope they change it quick to be responsive to what people actually want from them, which is to address our cost of living crisis, improve the conditions of confinement. But it's not easy to do.
By the way, for those who don't know the reference, actually after a speech at the National Press Club yesterday by Senator Warren, Donald Trump called her on the phone. And I
Yeah.
think I read something, she almost didn't take the call because she didn't recognize the number. But one last thing, a number of attorneys...
I'd be happy to take his call. I have a lot of thoughts on where that man and that president could work with me, and I'll pray for him before we start that conversation.
I know you will.
On the issue of affordability, on housing, on civil rights protections, on ways to actually help immigrants who want to become citizens, whole host of ways, whole host of solutions. That's what people want, instead of promises he keeps making that he knows he's not going to keep.
A number of U.S. attorneys, I think, have demonstrated themselves to be nothing more than essentially vessels for implementing the wishes of the President of the United States. Do you find the same out of the U.S. attorney in Massachusetts?
I hope not. At the end of the day, all of these folks who are doing these jobs, they're public servants.
Yeah.
And we have to always remind ourselves these jobs are not about us. It truly is about the public and serving them. And every time I'm in community, the number one thing they're asking me about is the Trump administration and accountability. Not just on affordability and what we can do there, but also on ICE accountability. These are folks who are going to communities masked. People don't know if they're being kidnapped, who are at times picking up folks who are not criminals and who do not have a record. And so I would love to be able to work with my U.S. attorney and say, hey, how do we reset? How do we really go after those criminals who are perpetuating crimes in our communities? How do we work in collaboration and in partnership? And how do we do it in such a way? We may not agree on everything, where we're not personalizing, it's not attacking each other. It truly is about getting things done on behalf of the people we all serve.
We have a text, and I think that this person, a lot of people are worried about this, what Massachusetts will be doing, Attorney General, to protect elections for the 2026 midterms, and if other states are working with us.
So I think we're fine here. Obviously, Secretary Galvin has been out there, and he has the most senior election official in the country, and he brings exceptional expertise. And of course, we've had to defend him against the Trump administration in some contexts too, for him doing his job. But we're working with other states that have more concerns around voter fraud and other things. And we're offering up our support, and sometimes from a litigation posture, sometimes just lending support to amicus or something else to protect access to the ballot, to expand that access. And so we'll continue to do the same here in Massachusetts.
About it?
I'm not as worried as maybe some others, but there are, of course, other states where that AG is more in the weeds on the ground. But I think, frankly, to combat that, we need more people voting. The end of the day, the turnout numbers in this country as a whole are abysmal, including in Massachusetts. I'm up for re-election. I want people to vote. I want people to hold me accountable. So, for example, if I said I was going to establish an elder justice unit, a police accountability unit, a reproductive justice unit, well, did you do that? I did all three of those things. Hold me accountable. And I get why people will want to throw up their hands with politics because they're just done with all these politicians who are just talking a lot. We are delivering for real people all across the state. And I can't do this job effectively if it's not in partnership with the people in the very state. And so in some communities, you're seeing voting numbers below 10%, below 20%. And I just encourage folks in this year and this season to get more civically engaged, to vote, to be engaged as much as you can. And I get it. You have jobs. You're busy. I'm looking at people in the audience. I get it. There's a lot going on. But that's why we have early voting. That's why we try to make it as flexible as we can. That's the way you hold people accountable. And if you don't like what they're doing, well, run for office yourself or vote them out.
You know, speaking of early voting, which I hadn't thought about in this context, we had Catherine Gergen-Barnett here yesterday talking about how not only clients, patients who are undocumented, but Latino patients, for example, who are citizens, not going to the doctor, not taking their kid to the doctor for fear of being snatched. So I would guess, I hadn't thought of this till now, if ICE ends up showing up at the polls, one of the ways to circumvent that is for people who are entitled to vote by mail, and not have to go through that experience.
I will say we're going to have to get real creative. It's not lost on me that even folks who are citizens, but who have family members that are immigrants, just the fear itself of being in community or in public is real.
Well, citizens
that they
are
may
being
not
snatched too. Like
right, they may
Target,
not want to vote. And so I think we can get creative, but I also think reminding folks that the policies that come out of an administration, including out of this state, including out of our offices, are not by accident. We were put here by voters. And if you want something different, you have power, and you have individual power, and you have collective power too.
Mallory from Quincy, you are on with the Attorney General. Thank you for calling.
Hi, Mallory.
Mallory?
Hi, good morning. My name is Mallory. I'm the co-director of Families for Justice as Healing, and I'm
Hi, Mallory.
the incarceration of women and girls. Hi.
How are you? Happy New Year.
I'm doing okay. Happy New Year. First and foremost, I want to thank you for your work to hold this federal administration accountable. And as always, I just want to deeply honor and appreciate you as a person who is directly impacted and whose family is directly impacted. Thank you for your leadership. I wanted to ask about an incident of state violence here in Massachusetts. Last month, Mr. Shacoby Kenny was killed by guards in the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department. He was being held on a relatively low bail and had not been convicted of anything. His murder was witnessed by dozens of men who are also being held in pretrial detention and who have tried to offer what they saw. This has been covered in the Boston Globe. Right now, the incident is being investigated by the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, and as you can imagine, there's a conflict of interest because these men are also being prosecuted by that same DA's office. On top of Mr. Kenny's murder, there's a pattern for years of abuse, brutality, and neglect at the Sheriff's Department. And I wanted to ask you today if the Attorney General's office could do an independent investigation of Mr. Kenny's murder, as well as abuse and neglect that's happening in the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department.
Thank you, Mallory. I will make sure we follow up with you because we obviously are following this case. And I know DA Haight and his team have already opened an investigation into this, and they're taking it very seriously. There are, as to your point, numerous people to investigate, to question, et cetera. The conflict of interest piece came up recently, I think before the end of the year, we got some outreach there, so we're still evaluating. So we'll follow up on this. No decisions have been made. We have only been in a posture of supporting this investigation because obviously someone died. So we'll follow up with you, Mallory, today on other ways we can be helpful.
Mallory, thank you very much for your call. We appreciate it.
Paul in Winthrop is texting, wants to ask the Attorney General her plans and timeline and strategy for any legal action against Winthrop and other towns not compliant with the, the rezoning for affordable houses around the Commonwealth.
I appreciate the question. We are on top of this right now. I think it's about 165 municipalities out of 177 that have come into or that have adopted compliant zoning. And so there are a small number of municipalities that have not as of yet. We gave folks to the end of January, based on our guidance last year, to come into compliance. And those that do not, we will take action as appropriate by the end of the month. And so just stay tuned. We're evaluating those options, and we'll have something certainly by the end of this month.
You know, speaking of options, Jamie, our colleague, just handed me a Truth Social post from a, in my opinion, very dangerous president of the United States. It begins with, do the people of Minnesota really want to live in a community in which there are thousands of convicted murderers, drug dealers, addicts, rapists, et cetera? You know, that's his line about every immigrant is a rapist or a murderer. And he ends in capital letters, fear not, great people of Minnesota. The day of reckoning and retribution is coming. You talk to Keith Ellison, your counterpart. What do you do when a rogue Constitution declining, doesn't care about Constitution, doesn't care about laws? I think it's been demonstrated. What do you do if you're the Attorney General of a state? Fear not, great people of Minnesota. The day of reckoning and retribution is coming. What do you do?
First of all, A.G. Ellison and I are different faith traditions.
He's Muslim, wasn't he? The
yes,
first?
and so we talk quite a bit because we are praying people, and I am a believer and believe in Jesus Christ. And so first of all, I would say back to this president, and Keith Ellison would say the same, we don't fear. Fear not. We will not. We have no fear of this Trump administration. We have no fear of this president. What we will continue to do is to do our jobs, and that is to protect our residents and protect our economies, as we've been doing. And I am really proud and grateful to A.G. Ellison and A.G. Raoul for filing their actions against this administration in the context of ICE. I was saddened, as anyone else, to witness the death of that young woman in Minnesota and all of the attacks and videos we were seeing, including folks being sprayed with tear gas who were just peacefully protesting. And so we're doing our jobs. What I actually want folks to recognize is, for Keith Ellison and A.G. Raoul in Illinois, or me here in Massachusetts, or A.G. Bonta in California, or A.G. James in New York, or Dan out in Oregon, all of these Democratic AGs, as we do our jobs, there are targets on our backs. And we need the people to be with us. There are not enough folks that know who their AG is and what the AG's office is doing to hold this president accountable. So one, get to know your Attorney General. Follow us on social media. Follow us on our websites. The same is true for Keith in Minnesota. The second, become a part of some of that work. There are different ways to engage. And then lastly, we'll keep doing our jobs. At the end of the day, everyone should be concerned. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, or you're not registered at all with anything. This country looks very different now than it did before this Trump administration. They are sowing fear. They are killing U.S. citizens. They just kidnapped a president or leader in Venezuela for oil. While we have a cost of living crisis here, they could be directing that energy here to help us help poor people and middle-class families that are struggling. They are in this for profit and profit for themselves while undermining the Constitution and our democratic values. And I do this work not just because I care about the people I serve here in Massachusetts. I'm a mom of 2 young boys, 6 and 8. I want Massachusetts to be better for them. I want this country to be better for them. And the prospects of that is going to diminish as long as people stand on the sidelines, not being a part of the accountability work of this community, of this president, I should say. Not just individuals protesting, and kudos to those folks who are, not just to folks who are lawyers stepping up and volunteering their legal services, or community-based organizations that are doing their part, or teachers who are looking out and saying, where's my student who was an immigrant student I haven't seen in a week, and going above and beyond to find that student that has disappeared. The business community needs to step up. Everything is at stake, and so everyone needs to ask themselves, what are they doing to hold this administration accountable? Each of us can do something, because these type of tweets that you just heard from the president will continue to come. And so I'm grateful for an A.G. Ellison in Minnesota with a target on his back, that he wakes up every day to exercise that courage to do what's necessary to protect our Constitution and our people, and most importantly, to hold this administration accountable.
What'd you make of the video of the killing of Renee Good? What did you make of it?
I have to, devastated. For me, it's almost like this was going to happen at some point. Every time I've come on the radio, folks have asked, including in person and community, how do we hold these officials accountable for the egregious posture and the aggressive posture they are doing in our communities in terms of immigration enforcement? I have state police, including here with me today, who do not have that posture. It is one of patience, calm as best they can under some horrific circumstances, to be transparent, to hold folks accountable for crime, and to do it in accordance with the Constitution and state law. Instead, what we're seeing is our federal counterparts show up differently. And we kept saying, if that is the aggressive posture and the lack of transparency, even when we were asking questions about people being detained, and we never got a response as to where they were, that is going to lead not to public safety, but to fear, and most importantly, it will jeopardize residents' lives and possibly that of law enforcement. And so when I saw that video, I ached like everyone else. I was angry, just like A.G. Ellison. I was upset, and then I was even more angered by the response of the president and also by the vice president that would suggest that that woman, who was a U.S. citizen going to just drop off a child, brought that death on herself.
Do you think she was murdered?
I think, based on the video and the accounts, that it could be murder. That being said, we know, in the role that I have as Attorney General, that you have to prove that, and that's what A.G. Ellison is going to do, and I'm proud that he's inserting himself to do a thorough investigation to get to a conclusion of whether or not she was murdered. Even though the feds and the FBI are cutting him out, I'm grateful that he's doing it, and I told him I support him every step of the way to seek accountability for her death, and most importantly, to also seek relief for the practices in which, the way in which they're showing up in community to stop this practice, this aggressive posture, the lack of transparency, and of course, the lack of accountability.
Beth in Boston, you're on with the Attorney General. Thank you for calling.
Hi, Beth.
Hi. I just had a question. I'll only turn this down. I had a question for, I'm sorry. I have to take you off.
We're not going anywhere.
We
it's
can
fine.
hear you.
Sorry.
We
I'm
can
sorry.
hear you, Beth.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just had a question because Pam Bondi changed the definition of domestic terrorism, or added a line to the definition of domestic terrorism along the lines of, you can't publicly protest if it is against family values, some sense of morality, and
traditional
when they do
morality.
investigations,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what does that even mean? And
Exactly.
how is that going to impact investigations? And is there anything states can do to codify language so we don't get caught up in a, this craziness about what is domestic terrorism?
We don't need to. I will say we have the Constitution, we have state laws. We're crystal clear as to what the law is. What we're seeing is an administration that is seeking to misinterpret the law or blatantly violate it. We saw that out the gate. The number one lawsuit we had against this administration was for birthright citizenship, to protect birthright citizenship. That has been the law of the land for 150 years. And here in Massachusetts, I'm born and raised in Boston. If you know your history of this great Commonwealth, these are Italians and Jewish folks and Irish, folks who came here seeking opportunity, seeking a better life, and who used birthright citizenship as they expanded their families to ensure they would be extended the rights and the privileges of this great country. And so they do not want to enforce the law as it is. They are seeking to manipulate it for their ends, and that, of course, is to undermine our Constitution, not address affordability of the cost of living crisis, demonize immigrants, deport many of them for nonsense, and it's sad. And so we will continue to stand up. The law is crystal clear, and if anything, we just have to continue to exercise courage in enforcing it against this administration.
Beth, thanks. Speaking of
By the way,
I'm
we
sorry.
should just say her thing is about challenging traditional American Christian and family-oriented values.
But I have to
Specifically-
remind her, as a believer
Yeah.
who's standing here praying and also in the middle of a fast, that the Jesus I serve is all about love, compassion, empathy, crystal clear. Came to sit
Yeah.
amongst the sinners and with the sinners, came to be with the sinners, to seek their repentance and not to save the righteous. So Pam Bondi, I don't know what you're talking about, but it's total nonsense.
What did Deval Patrick tell us when
He said these people must be reading a different Bible than I
Absolutely.
read.
Absolutely. And I think, frankly, we need to be going back at them with some of that, too.
Yeah.
Attorney General, speaking of affordability, we've asked you certify ballot questions to say that they comport with, I think, Article 48, that they're constitutionally proper. Then people have to collect signatures. According to Bill Galvin, as many as 11 ballot questions would
Yeah.
be before the voters next November, which is, I think, a record number.
That's great.
The governor told us she's voting no on the rent control question. Mayor Wu, who obviously supports rent control, rent stabilization, says she may sit it out. She's not crazy about the language. How are you voting on the rent control question?
I don't have a posture yet, and part of it is, while there are 11 already that he has certified, Secretary Galvin being the he, there is still potential litigation for these ballot questions. Either we've heard about it and it's not public yet that someone is going to file something, and so I have to wait because I'm in the middle of that process, so I can't take a posture on these yet. But
You will.
I can, once we get through the process, including potential lawsuits that may challenge them appearing on the ballot later this year.
Fair enough.
Paul and Beverly, thank you for calling.
Hey, Paul.
Good morning.
Good morning, Paul.
Good morning. I'm with Dignity Alliance Massachusetts, a statewide advocacy group for long-term care, and we want to thank you, Attorney General, for your advocacy for older adults and people with disabilities, and particularly creating the Elder Justice Unit this year.
Oh, thank you.
Yesterday, you're welcome. Yesterday, the governor announced the findings and recommendations from the Living Commission, which we are grateful for. We're eagerly now waiting you to issue the proposed regulations under Chapter 93A regarding assisted living. When those could be issued.
Well, could you say, Paul, we had trouble hearing you. It wasn't a great connection.
Yeah.
Can you just repeat the end, your question one more time for the Attorney General? Just the question.
Yeah. When do you expect to issue the proposed regulations under Chapter 93A regarding assisted living residences?
Did you get that?
Oh, got it. Those are
Thank you,
in
Paul.
the works. I will get an update before the end as to exactly where those are as of today. I think it's the first time in the history of the office we have done regulations for assisted living residents. But we're working on finalizing those, Paul, and if I have an actual date before the end of the radio program, I will say that on the radio.
Paul, thanks for
So
calling.
we're actively working on finalizing
Does
those
this have to do with
regulations.
the fire in Fall River? That
No,
was,
this
oh,
was
that's
separate.
That's a different
right.
thing. Okay. Okay.
We're following that too, but
Okay.
we are the assisted living regulations, just like other types of long-term care facilities. We play an active role in holding folks accountable that harm residents who are in these different facilities, whether stealing from them or not providing them adequate care, elder abuse. And so for assisted living residences, there were no regulations. And so our office promulgated those, and we're finalizing those soon. And I would just say, Paul, they should be ready soon, sooner than later, so keep following us on the website.
Attorney General, today we're going to discuss this with former federal Judge Gertner at 1 o'clock today. The trans athlete case is going to be argued before the Supreme Court of the United States. I mean, the conventional wisdom is they're going to rule against the athletes. On one hand, I think we'd all agree trans people are among the most vulnerable and persecuted in the country. On the other hand, 80% of people, including 2/3 of Democrats, don't support trans women participating in sports. The Democrats, a lot of people think, and I happen to share this view, in part were sunk in 2024 because of the $170 million Trump spent on those commercials about, he's for you, they, the Democrats, Kamala Harris, are for they, them. How do the Democrats deal with this trans athlete issue in the midterms in a way that doesn't cause them to all get sunk?
Stop doing avoidance. I think at the end of the day, to your point around the presidential, and I was traveling at that time and campaigning for Kamala Harris, and of course at that time, Waltz as well, because I believed in her vision more so than I did President Trump's. And I felt as though avoidance. So if you saw that ad, well, what is the response? But also what I also saw them do is to focus on, I think, trans folks are maybe 2% of the population, to take this small population and demonize these folks, regardless of your position on them. They are human beings, number one. And to use these folks as the problem for every issue that Americans are facing. The number one issue is cost of living and affordability. Everything is too expensive. And no one was really in a deep, consistent way talking about that. So it's don't avoid the issue, and then talk about what people want to talk about the most, and talk about how you're going to deliver for them. And I think, for me, as I get out there as Attorney General, I'm talking about my Trump accountability work and the work my incredible team is doing every day. But I tell folks, I don't want to just be known as the Attorney General who's fighting back against Trump. We are doing a lot on affordability. We just had a $10 million lawsuit against a corporate landlord in Springfield that was having folks live in the most horrific conditions while they're paying their rent and not delivering the housing they deserved. We just had a consumer protection case involving credit cards, and where the APR was over 100%, Consumer Protection Division delivering for folks. We're putting money back into the pockets of workers. You talk about Uber and Lyft, drivers are now getting a wage that they deserve and benefits. That was the first time that happened in a significant way, led by Massachusetts. So for me, it's affordability, talk about what they want, deliver real substance, stop pointing out the problems of, we're not doing well because the other side, no, and then hold Trump accountable.
You also said don't avoid the question, so don't avoid the question. Should trans women be allowed to participate in women's sports?
I support it, and I have. And for me, someone who has gone through that self-analysis, that mental health journey, that spiritual journey, that physical journey, who am I to judge that decision? As Jesus would say, who am I to judge that decision? Who am I to demonize that human being? That is not my call. It's not my call. And frankly, it's not, it's really hard to swallow that on the backs of trans youth right now, including some right here in Massachusetts that are taking their own life because of the environment in which they are being threatened every single day, that we would have an administration and people blaming them every single day for the problems of this state and the problem of America. And most of them are kids. Unacceptable as far as I'm concerned.
Gary in Norfolk, you're on with the Attorney General.
Hi, Gary. Gary.
Gary?
Have an easy one, I hope. You hear me okay?
Yep.
So, to Patriot Stadium, with advising you, and they don't accept.
Gary, bad news. We can't hear you. If we're going to put you on hold, and if a producer back in Brighton could find out what Gary was trying to ask, we'll ask
Refusing
him.
cash at Gillette Stadium.
Oh, it is?
That's
Okay.
what he's worried about.
Can they do that?
So we should talk about this. So there was, I got on here before and it was about Fenway, Gillette, the T.
I remember.
And there was an exception for the T. And then, of course, for the stadiums, they were saying, we're not refusing it. We just have these pay systems. Everyone is different. So I do think one of the things we are going to go back to is revisit this very issue, especially as we prepare for World Cup games coming here and other things. So, Gary, we will come back to this, and maybe the next time I'm
Great.
on,
We'll
I
do
can
it.
bring up more details here after having conversations with all teams on this one.
We'll do it.
Let's go to Paul in Braintree. Thank you for calling, Paul.
Thank you,
Hey,
Gary.
Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Marjorie, Madam Attorney General. I have a quick question on the process and implementation of the state's stormwater Runoff Act. I live in a large condominium development with 390 units, and on our individual water bills is attached the storm water fee, but they also attach that fee to the trust itself.
Huh.
As an individual owner, I only own within the four walls of my unit. I have no stormwater runoff fee. So the town of Braintree is collecting approximately another $7,000 per quarter for attaching the fee to the 390 units plus the trust itself, which should be paying the stormwater runoff fee. It seems like they're collecting the fee twice, unless the implementation of it, from my understanding, is incorrect.
Paul, if you could stay on, this sounds like a specific bill question, but if you could stay on, I think we'd like to see the bill, et cetera. Maybe there's some other tenants from where you live that we have heard from. I'm not sure. But if you could stay on, I'd like to get your contact and we can follow up. Stay on with Martin, please.
Do you miss being on the Boston City Council?
No.
Okay, so
No offense to my colleagues. I was just reaching out to one this morning saying, and obviously I congratulated Liz on being council president.
Reardon, yeah.
It's not an easy role.
Reardon, I'm sorry.
And I stay in touch with my council colleagues. I loved being District 4 City Councilor. I'll start welling up in tears because those were my people and they still are. I love being Attorney General. I love my job. It's purpose-driven work every single day. And I also love to actually get out of Boston to other parts of the state, as far as Berkshire County, the South Coast, the Cape, frankly, communities that feel left out and left behind, because I think we tend to talk about Boston all the time. And I can say that because I'm born and raised in Boston. And people are like, what about me? And I'm like, I know, what about you?
We're on NEPM in Springfield right now as we speak.
So I love it. And even when you guys came out to Springfield, what that
did.
meant.
Yeah, it was great. We loved it.
It was wonderful to
Yep.
be out there with you. So for me, this job allows me to interact with more people across the state.
So did you have a problem with the what are I think fairly described as sort of the backroom politics that ended up with Breeden being the council president?
I have no idea what happened there.
Yes, you do.
No, I don't.
You really don't?
I don't. I was following it like everybody else, thinking, oh, okay, this person will be council president, and then I got an alert saying, oh, it's somebody else. So no, not at all. At the end of the day, it's up to the colleagues. That's what I always impress. When I became council president, the voters don't get a say on that. Those are your colleagues, and you have to earn their respect. You have to earn their vote, and it's a tough job. So congratulations to Liz, and I wish her well, of course.
We have a minute for Bernadette in a
Yeah,
truck.
I'm sorry, Bernadette. You
1 minute.
You have to be quick, but thank you for calling.
Okay, I'll ask my question quickly. If an ICE agent comes for me, can I hit him with my car and kill him and not go to jail? It's a serious question.
Unfortunately, Bernadette, you will be arrested, and they will hold you accountable, and that's the problem. We're saying right now, the way in which things are being done, you would be held accountable, and yet for us to try to get accountability for ICE officials, they're making that extremely difficult and hard, and we want to change that. And that's why I'm working with AGs across the country, including AG Ellison in Minnesota, AG Raoul in Illinois, to support them in holding ICE accountable when things go terribly wrong. And then where ICE is doing their job to pick up someone who is perpetuating crime, okay. But we know that that's not the case. They're picking up folks who are here lawfully, and it's very difficult to hold them accountable, and we think that's unfair.
You know, Bernadette, thanks for the call. Bernadette told our call screener that one of the things she wanted to ask you, but we rushed her. Are there any Republican, this is a good question, state AGs that are allied with what you and others Democratic AGs are doing around ICE, or is it all Democrats?
There is all Democrats. There is not one Republican AG that has joined any of our efforts, not one, including the 47 lawsuits on NIH funding to save our public education and public schools, to save our libraries, our museums, our cultural institutions. Not one Republican AG has joined. To save SNAP benefits, not one.
Attorney General, it's good to see you as
Thank
always.
you, and
Thanks so
happy
much for your
New Year,
time.
everyone.
Same to you, of course.